So, hello and good morning and welcome to the Audit Committee meeting today. This is the third virtual meeting of the Audit Committee. Before we move on to the formal agenda, there are a few procedural housekeeping issues we need to deal with. This meeting is being held under the virtual meetings regulations using Microsoft Teams. Decisions made by the committee will have the same standing and validity as if they'd been made at a physical meeting held at the town hall. We are streaming today's meeting live on the internet, and a recorded version will be available to view within 48 hours on the North Somerset Council website. I would refer councillors to the meeting etiquette. And guide to using Teams as previously circulated. Please remember to use your headphones. Would you also please ensure that your audio is muted when you are not speaking and that your camera is turned off when you're not speaking. When you are speaking, please can you ensure the video is turned on and obviously the audio is turned on. When you wish to speak, would you please indicate this by using the chat function rather than hand signals, as it's easier to monitor requests to speak from a single source. I will invite each of you to speak by way of a queue system. Please do not use the chat function for anything other than request to speak and official council business. If you're leaving the meeting or returning to the meeting, would you please ensure that I am aware of this by using the chat function. This is paramount in respect of any disclosable pecuniary interests where you are not permitted to participate in the agenda item by law. You should immediately leave the meeting before the start of any debate on an item where you have a disclosable pecuniary interest. A Democratic Services Officer will confirm when you've left the meeting or rejoined the meeting following determination of an agenda item. Sorry folks, this is a long spiel of course. Voting. When proposing a motion, would you please indicate via the chat function that you wish to speak and wait until I invite you to do so. Please then clearly state what you are moving. If you are seconding a motion, please again clearly indicate you wish to speak via the chat function and wait for me to call you. The clerk will call each councillor in turn by name in alphabetical order to carry out the roll call. Please state clearly if your vote is for or against the motion or abstain. Please remember to turn on your microphone when voting. I think that's the same as we said before. Before I move to the agenda, are there any questions from councillors? Take it there are none. Can all members see and hear today's proceedings? May I have your confirmation, please?
Yes.
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 Thank you very much. Please ensure all mobiles are switched off. For the benefit of those in the meeting and members of the press and public who will be watching via YouTube, we will undertake a roll call of all the councillors to confirm attendance. The committee clerk will now undertake a roll call and I will move on to the formal agenda after that.
Thank you, Chairman. So, Councillor Cato.
Present.
Councillor Hearn.
Present.
Councillor Pepperell. I don't think she's joined us yet, Chairman. Councillor Keating.
Present.
Councillor Westwood.
Present.
For the benefit of those watching, we have Gail Turner-Radcliffe with us from Grant Thornton and John Roberts from Grant Thornton. We have Jeff Ring and Peter Can from Audit West. And we have the officers of North Somerset Council. We have Mel Watts, Richard Pensker, Steve Ballard, Mike Riggle, Hazel Brinton from Corporate Services. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Hazel. Appreciate that. So we now move to the first item of the agenda. Thank you. Are there any addresses by members of the public?
There were none, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any apologies for absence?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests?
Nothing received, Chairman.
Thank you. So we now move to item 4 of the agenda, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of November 2020, and wish to approve that as a correct record. Can I ask other members whether or not they have anything they want to make as amendments to that, or if anybody else has any points of note where they think there should be any amendments to that?
Well, I'm fine.
Nothing indicated, Chairman.
Nothing indicated. Okay.
No.
So in that case, I propose we approve that as a correct record. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second.
Thank you, Sandra. And anybody against it being approved as a correct record? I take it from my earlier question, there are none. So everybody approves that as a correct record, I believe, Hazel.
Yes, that's correct, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any matters referred by council, the executive, other committees and panels? And it says here there are none. Is that correct, Hazel?
That's correct, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So now we're moving on to the external audit update. We have a, for those members that have downloaded the combined document, that is pages 11 to 59 of the combined document. And we're starting with 11 to 26, was the annual audit letter from the council's external auditor. So if we can turn to that document, please, folk. And I believe we're going to receive a presentation on that. Is that right?
Thank you, Chair. It's John Roberts here, and I'm the new engagement leader taking over from Barry Morris. And I'll introduce myself in sort of due course over the course of the meeting. I can only see from here. I can see a picture of councillors. I can't see what you can see by way of papers. Do you want me to take you through in terms of individual pages and so on?
So we've received the papers, and the papers aren't currently being shared on the screen. Mm-hmm. If you would like them to be shared on the screen to talk to, John, then we can arrange that.
I think it will help in not necessarily this report, but the next two. It will help if we could do it for our second two. Yeah. Okay.
So if we can just have a quick conflab here with Hazel or Mike about sharing that document. Would that be possible?
Yes, Chairman, I can share my screen, or any one of you can share your screens if needs be, but I can share my screen so that I can show the report.
So that would be very good if you're able to show the report, so that we share that screen so that John can talk to that. I propose that we go through that, John, with you talking to it. We will have to, all of our pictures will then move out of the way. So if people have any questions as we're going along, please can you flag up in chat that you want to raise a question. And Hazel, please can you monitor the chat and let me know if somebody wants to ask a question at that time.
I will do, Chairman. I'm hoping you can see my screen. I have shared it.
I can see it. That's really good. Thank you.
Excellent.
I can see it from our side as well, and that's great. And I suspect we won't need to do a page turn on this item, but we certainly will on the other two reports. So this annual audit letter is a summary of the audit work that's gone before. Clearly this predates my role, but Gail will be available to answer any questions members have on it. There shouldn't be any new material in it. It's intended to be a summary of the detailed discussions you would have had when you consider the audit findings report at the meeting that we were signing off the accounts and VFM conclusion. The point of these documents over time was that these were a public-facing summary of the audit work, and they were typically the only public communication that the auditor had following the outcomes of the audit. Since local authority audit committees are now all in public, and you will have had the detailed discussions in public, these reports have largely been overtaken in their value, and as such, this is the last ever annual audit letter you will see. They have been abolished and replaced by the auditor's annual report, which we will explain on the next item exactly what that is and how that's different from the annual audit letter. So Gail, do you have any points of detail on the annual audit letter you wanted to bring out?
Thanks, John. No, I was just going to say this is the text in this report should be familiar to the committee. This is echoing the audit findings report that we presented in November, but I am happy to take any questions.
So, members, are there any questions?
Nothing indicated in chat, Chairman.
Okay. I'd just like to note, turn my camera back on. I'd just like to note for the record, in that report, there are one or two areas of recommendations, and I'd just like them to be noted for officers that we've got them logged and are tracing them, and that we can have conversations about those going forward. Is that okay with everybody, please? Particularly officers involved.
Chair, that's fine. So we will we'll come back with a sort of regular review on implementation of recommendations, possibly in next quarter.
Okay, appreciate that, Rich. Thank you. So that's my only observation on that. We've discussed it before, most of this. Was that done? Yeah, Rich, go on.
Just going to say that Marcia Pepperell appears to have come along.
She managed to join us now.
I think so.
Oh, well done, Marcia.
Thank you. And I do apologise for being so late. I turned on my computer early and I was too early and the whole system froze and it's taken me forever to sort it out.
No, I'm so sorry for you. I know what it's like.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, welcome now.
Thank you.
You missed it. You missed the introductory conversations, and basically, it's when you're not participating, switch you into mute, and also you can switch your video off. When you aren't speaking, then please switch your video and the audio on. And if you want to raise any comments, questions, or ask to speak or anything like that, please say in chat, and Hazel will be monitoring that for us and being able to raise it. Other than that, I think that covers the essential items. So that's the audit progress report. First document. Can we move on to the next one, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. That was the annual audit letter. Now we move on to the audit progress report, as you can see on your screen here. Gail is going to talk to the first part of it, and I'll pick up on the new value for money work that we'll be doing.
Thank you, John.
So this is a typical report that we bring to each committee. Progress at January 21. So for the 1920, we issued the unqualified audit opinion on the 19th of November, and you've just received the annual audit letter, which closes that financial year down. With regards to 2021, we will begin to look shortly at the new financial year, but in the meantime, we are continuing to have conversations with officers, as well as reviewing the latest papers and regulator reports. I'll skip over the value for money section here because John's going to cover that shortly. But if I move on to housing benefits, certification of claims and returns, the housing benefit claim, so DWP moved the deadline to the 31st of January. We are currently working on the claim, although the council has received an extension until the end of February, so that work is currently ongoing. With regards to the teacher's pension claim, we completed our work and this has been submitted. The next slide shows the audit deliverables. And as you can see there, the 1920 year-end deliverables have now all been received by yourselves. For the 2021 deliverables, we will be bringing our audit plan to the next committee so that we can then begin to work on that financial year. So I'll now hand over to John for the sector update part of this report.
Right, and if we scroll down, and there'll be a slide with a little graphic on it that says value for money update for Audit Committee on new arrangements. That's it. This is the biggest change that's happened to the audit this year. So the National Audit Office that sets the code of audit practice for local audit has examined the work that auditors have done in value for money in recent years. And whilst that was originally, I would say, fit for purpose and served us well, over time it was getting a little bit stale. And if we move on to the next slide. There was concerns that value for money work was quite high level, in fact too high level to give sufficient insight. It wasn't giving a particular value to audited bodies, and that there was a need to make it as current and as relevant as possible to do more work in this area, but by doing more work to do better work and work that's more useful in terms of the independent commentary and challenge that auditors can make of public bodies, and hence the value to the taxpayer of that audit work. If we can jump down another slide. Members will have been, some things are fairly similar. So members will be familiar with the previous structure of the value for money work, which had focused on informed decision making, sustainable resource deployment, and working with partners and third parties. And if you remember, in our reports, we had a sort of a pyramid exhibit of that. Those have been replaced by 3 other criteria, but they are closely related, if you can see there. So governance, financial sustainability, and improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. So that really feels the biggest change to me. That's about the council's arrangements for improving the performance of the value for money and services that it provides. So jumping down another slide. I said the annual audit letter was the last annual audit letter that you will receive. The auditor's annual report has replaced that, but it is and will be significantly different from what you've seen before. So again, drop down another slide. Now, under previous value for money arrangements, we took a relatively high level overview. We identified risks, and we drilled down and did some specific work on those risks and reported by exception. Now, that's been replaced by the need for the auditors to actually provide a more holistic commentary across all the arrangements covered by the code. So if you remember, governance, financial sustainability, and the 3 E's. And so that's going to be much more of a discursive report. We're looking to build into that report much greater use of benchmarking, much greater use of best practice comparisons, and so on. And that will help us to form that's more sort of recognizable and challenge back to us more useful commentary on the authority's arrangements for providing value for money. That auditor's annual report will also include our financial statements work, our opinion on the financial statements, the use of any formal auditor's powers and so on. But importantly, it will make recommendations around value for money, and we'll move on to those now if we go down to the next slide. Yeah.
May I pause there for a second? I think Councillor Westwood wants to speak. Did you want to speak, Rich?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. There we go. I'm not muted now. Just a question: if you look at the 3 criteria that have changed, the informed decision making goes to governance, the sustainable resource deployment goes to financial stability, and working with partners and other third parties, improving economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. If I may say so, the old ones were quite active. Sustainable resource deployment. That implies that the council should be doing something with its resources. And now we've gone to financial stability to replace that. Is that because of the government is thinking that there might be too much of a risk for councils to be sustainably resourcing deploying?
I don't think there's any government that the NAO sets its code in. It's independent of government, so there's no political overlay to these at all. Although the code is adopted by Parliament, that's certainly a relevant point. But no, the NAO sets the detail independently. I think the main headlines are very brief, very sort of hard for you to tell exactly then what actually makes up the detail of that. If you were to go back into the National Audit Office's Code of Practice and its guidance, you'll see that the NAO then explains what makes up those 3 headings and gives auditors a very clear and consistent framework for following up work under those areas. So the devil is in the detail there. So if members are able to spend a little bit of time going on to the National Audit Office's website, it's well and clearly set out under the local audit section of that website. Yeah,
we did some work of our own, phoning around and talking to other audit committees up and down the country, and an interesting thing came out as far as audit practice is concerned. As far as Wales is concerned, they're going to introduce very soon a completely revamped audit process in Wales, which puts far more emphasis on, I suppose, not impartiality, but independence. They're looking to make sure that audit committees are chaired by independent members, and that they are a far broader base. Which, okay, it's not this, as it were, but it shows you the way the thinking is going, and whether that will transfer across to England, it will be interesting to see. It's certainly a recommendation in the Redmond review, which I will come on to in the next item. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, John. Okay. No trouble. If we move down to the recommendation slide again, please.
Apologies, John. Councillor Keating has asked to speak as well.
Yep.
Thank you, Hazel.
You may come to this later, but I'd be interested in understanding if there's any sort of concrete examples for us here in North Somerset of how this change in reporting approach might work, or what we might see. I think that might help us understand what impact this change of approach might have, and would be useful. Thanks.
Okay. In a nutshell, the difference is, under our audit findings report, you'll have seen under the value for money sections us concentrating on a couple of risk areas, setting out maybe a table of how we'd dealt with the risk areas and whether that risk had manifested itself in a qualified VFM conclusion or not. in the case of this new code, it's a much more holistic description of the council's arrangements and our audit assessment and consideration of those arrangements. So it won't just be on the defined risks; it'll be across all areas of those three main criteria. The big change then, when we do come down to the recommendation slide, please, is that the audit conclusion previously for value for money, the focus of that conclusion was what's called a binary conclusion. It was a pass or fail, were you qualified or not in these areas. Now that's been replaced by a focus on, because it's a narrative report and because auditors are considering things in the round, it's focusing on the identification of weakness. So rather than qualifying your conclusion, the auditors will consider all areas and seek to highlight any weaknesses of those arrangements to members and publicly. And those weaknesses will be split in terms of sort of level of severity. So there may be just a general observation for improvement, which is a typical expectation that you would get in all organizations. No organization is perfect. You'll always find scope for improvement. But more significantly, if the auditor finds areas of significant weakness, they are to make key audit recommendations for value for money, and these have a greater status, and they will sit within our audit opinion section of our formal audit report. So that's really the main difference of the formal outcomes of the VFM approch. What I hope you will find is it's a more useful audit element of the audit to you. We're working hard on developing our audit approach, making sure it's more it brings in more insights, as I say, more best practice, more benchmarking, and so on, working with our consultancy teams to build up that approach. But I think as with any new change, it'll probably take a couple of years to really get settled in. We'll need to do it, learn from it on both sides in the first year, and then as we continue to apply it, we will build up our sort of repository of best practice information and so on, and it will become, I think it'll become more robust the more we apply it. So that's the value for money audit. If anyone's got any further questions on it.
Nothing noted from other members in chat, Chairman.
Okay, so we'll continue to obviously engage with you and keep you updated of it as the work progresses. Gail, were there any other areas you wanted to bring out on our progress update?
Thank you, John.
Sorry, John. Councillor Pepperell does have a question. Apologies.
Thank you. Sorry, I was a bit slow reacting there. This page of recommendations, do I assume that's not actually pointing at North Somerset? This is a general thing in a paper.
Yes, that's right. Yes, this is all about how it's applying across the regime. So it's across local authorities throughout England and across local health bodies as well.
Just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, John. So on the next 2 pages of this report, there's quite a lot of text, but it's, sorry if you scroll down to this one. So this is talking about revised ISAs and some work we're going to be doing around estimates. And reading through this, you can see that we've listed out some of the estimates that from our knowledge that the council has. On the last page, we've got a section, how can you help? And this is directed towards the committee. So I just wanted to highlight this. In previous years, we've brought you what we call our planning inquiries as part of our risk assessment procedures, where we ask you questions about fraud and going concern, etc. But for 2021 audit, we'll be making some additional inquiries of the committee about accounting estimates in a similar way. So I just wanted to highlight that towards the committee.
Gail, the chairman has a question of you.
Hello, Gail. Thank you. On page, forgive me, I'm looking the other way because I've got two screens working here. On page 16 of that report, which was the previous slide, that is a generic report, I'm assuming, is it, that statement, on the grounds that areas where the council is likely to apply estimates is on the Tamar Bridge and Cornwall Airport?
Apologies, Chair, good spot. Yes, yeah, so it will be on valuation of land and buildings that the council has. So
this one isn't specific to us. This is a copy and paste from somewhere else. Is that right?
So that's correct. Yes, the majority of the bullet points will stand. So the council has land and buildings, depreciation, provisions, accruals, etc. So all those bullet points will be relevant. That there could be some more coming in this financial year as well. So we will work with officers, but when we send out our planning inquiries, then we will ask the committee to consider those as part of its response to us.
Okay, so if we carry on treating this particular document as a generalised document, would that be fair?
Yes.
That's right. Yeah, the first half is the bespoke part for North Somerset Council. The rest is a general copy that we use on all of these documents.
Okay, so in terms of that, though, within just below where we're talking about the Tamar Bridge, we've got valuation of level 2 and level 3 investments. Can you tell me what that is, please? What's level 2 and what's level 3? What does it mean?
So when we look at the financial instruments of the council, so that's how the hierarchy of how things are valued. So it works on a 1, 2, 3 system. So when we look at level 1 items, those will be items, for example, shares that we can see observable inputs, for example, shares on a stock exchange. We can go back and see what the valuation of that share was on that particular day. Where you've got the other end of the scale, which are level 3 investments, which are not so easily to value, so there's no observable input to the valuation. So this could be, for example, if the council had shares in a small limited company that wasn't traded on the stock exchange, how would we then value those shares? So it's just a valuation hierarchy.
So presumably that's defined somewhere in a document somewhere, is it?
So the valuation hierarchy is part of the CIPFA code that the officers will use to prepare the financial statements.
Okay, so is that defined also, having been mentioned in this document, is it defined in a glossary in this document at all? I didn't notice that it was.
No, I don't think it is.
So may I request that as and when documents come to us, would you be so good as to include even a brief glossary what it is or how members would be able to look up what this actually means?
Okay, noted, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John.
Okay.
Gail.
Yes, if there are no further questions on that one, we have a presentation then on the Redmond review, which is the next. That's it. Re-energising local audit.
Excellent, thank you.
So could I ask you, Chair, how long you want us to focus on this now for the meeting? Because there's a lot of slides. I can summarise them and go through them relatively swiftly, or we can take our time and work through them in detail.
Chairman, did you hear John's question?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, please try and focus on specifically the things which are important. The slides themselves, some of them are fairly straightforward and obvious, and some of them are less so. So if you can focus on the less obvious for things that you think are of value, and I'm particularly interested, obviously, in the Redmond review as well.
So, absolutely, Chair. And yeah, I'm more than happy for if members want me to stop, clarify points as we're going through. Please do shout out. I won't mind the flow sort of stopping and starting. I think it's good if we can have these sort of discussions as a sort of an informal discussion rather than a sort of a more formal sort of lecture type presentation. So moving on to the slide's got a little picture of me, my career journey. The point around this is that I've been a local auditor for 30 plus years now, going back into the late 80s when I worked for the District Audit Service, worked with Steve Ballard for a while back in the day. I then progressed through, joined Robson Rhodes, and I actually became North Somerset's auditor from around about 2004, and there I worked with Richard Pensker on a number of things, particularly a sort of a significant report that we did at the time on the waste service. I was made a partner on it, and then I led Grant Thornton's Birmingham public sector team before transferring back to Bristol now. The important point from that in the context of local audit and the Redmond review, though, is where are the next generation of local auditors going to come from? Is the local audit regime attractive enough to attract people to it, and then those people to be retained, to develop their skills, to develop their knowledge and expertise, to be the next generation of managers and partners? And that's one of the challenges that not just Grant Thornton, that all the firms dealing with local audit are facing, and it's a theme that'll come throughout this presentation. So if we move down a slide. There really, I'm just emphasising the importance of audit, whether it's in a public or a private sector context. Audit's really important, even from the point of it just being there and acting as a sort of an independent challenge. It has value to the governance and then the quality of financial reporting. And again, the importance of the Redmond review certainly recognises the importance of local audit, and that local audit is something that needs to be nurtured and developed. It's probably become more of a sense of commodity in recent years, and we're pleased that Redmond has come in and recognised the ongoing value of audit to the local government regime. Moving on to now, I'll just give a couple of slides of background and context to Redmond before going on to the detail of Redmond. Audit confidence is certainly under siege. There's been the issues set out on this slide in a public sector context, Northamptonshire County Council, but members will also be familiar with public interest reports that were issued on Nottingham City Council last year, and Croydon London Borough for its financial position last year, and even in the last week or so, you might have seen the local press on an audit report that we did at Bristol on its energy company. So audit does hit the headlines, sometimes for very positive issues. In the case of some of the areas on this slide, not so. So it's been recognised that audit needs constant attention, but it certainly needs to improve in terms of quality and the reassurance value that audit can give. Moving down a slide then, and I will go through these fairly quickly now because this is more context. Before our current system, we had the Audit Commission, and the Audit Commission put everything under one roof, really. It delivered audits of its own. It also commissioned some audits from the firms. It set the Code of Audit Practice, which is now a function of the National Audit Office. It set fees, which is now a function of PSAA, Public Sector Audit Appointments Limited. It mandated work in certain areas, and it regulated quality, which is now a function of the FRC. So by putting everything under one roof, it could operate effectively as the systems leader. When the Audit Commission was abolished, those functions were split under another number of bodies, which is set out on the next slide. Just going down. So councils prepared accounts, the firms audited them, the ICAW maintained the register of accredited firms to act in this sector, and also accredited audit partners to be able to sign audits. As I said, PSAA managed the contracts and set the fees. The FRC regulates the contracts, and the National Audit Office sets the code of practice, the scope of local audit. The jigsaw puzzle piece that sits outside that, in my opinion, was the role of MHCLG, which is by default, without the Audit Commission and without systems leadership being clearly defined, because there's so many jigsaw pieces to this regime, the role of systems leader defaults back to MHCLG, which is why MHCLG is the government department that's taken forward commissioning the Redmond Review and will now take forward responding to it. But I think up until most recently, I think MHCLG hadn't particularly been clearly visible as the systems leader, and that's been one of the issues that's resulted in the sort of the weaknesses to local audit as we've currently experienced them, is because there has been no really overarching systems leader here. Councillor Westwood, I think's question.
Yeah, I was just going to share something with you. I remember back in would have been 2009 when the Audit Commission was still alive. You could pick the phone up and you could report on an issue within your local authority, that you thought was of concern, and they would come back to you and they'd give you a view very quickly. And it was often, well, I can think of one incident. I won't say what it was, but it was quite significant, and to do with the recruitment of a senior officer for the local authority with which I was associated at that time. So I always found that the old Audit Commission was a very very good and effective and powerful tool. And just going back to your view as far as the ministry, as we'll call it, is concerned, that now beginning to maybe find its feet, shall we say, or deciding that it needs to start sorting stuff out a bit more, possibly in the way that the old Audit Commission used to do. So what was so good about the Audit Commission was that you felt that it was genuinely powerful and genuinely independent. I'm not sure as to the present situation, but there you go. I don't want to get into politics, not too much anyway.
Okay, thank you, Councillor, and I'll come back to that. Some of the things that were certainly missing post Audit Commission, and I've worked on both sides, so absolutely understand where you're coming from. Moving down a slide, the timetable was being moved earlier and earlier. So from the summer of 2018, we'd actually moved from an audit completion, which was in September, to a targeted audit completion of 31st of July. Now, the sector requires specialist auditors to do the work. The earlier you bring the deadline, the less time the firms have to be able to deliver that audit work. And by doing that, it's very, very difficult to do that work then by using specialist teams, virtually impossible. You'd have to in-source resource from across the firm, even from parts of the international structures of an organisation, in order to cope with earlier timetables. So that was particularly a tension under the arrangements as they were, and it's been an area of focus for Redmond. If we move on to the next slide now. Another area of focus for Redmond has been the complexity of local authority accounts and the consequence fees as well. So this is all information in the public domain. It's from a 10-year period from 2008-9 to 2018-19, where we do a little case study of Birmingham City Council's accounts and audit fees. So 10 years ago, Birmingham City Council's accounts were 91 pages long. They've grown to over 200 pages. The audit opinion was signed 11 months after the year end. In 1819, it was signed 6 months after the year end. But interestingly, the fees have gone from 700,000 10 years ago to 240,000 in 1819, and the grant claim fees has fallen as well. So therein lies the problem, really, is auditors were being, through increasing rounds of tendering, the fees were really following a race to the bottom, and had got to the point where they were underpriced, and that's recognised by Redmond. Not only were they underpriced in terms of how much they'd reduced, but the complexity and the work that auditors were having to do and the expected timetable for them to follow was also working against that. And that's the point from the councillor just now about the Audit Commission being accessible and being able to respond and being able to pick issues up and so on was absolutely the case. It was the case because the Audit Commission had much higher fees, and it had more staff working on individual audits, so that there was much more capacity there to be able to deploy in responding. So by following this commercial race to the bottom, we'd actually also lost a lot of, in my opinion, we lost a lot of the value of the historical auditor's role and presence in a local authority. If we jump down another slide. The committee will be familiar with the role of the FRC in inspecting auditors' work, and going back to the very early slides where I was talking about Carillion, British Home Stores, Patisserie Valerie, you could add Thomas Cook to that list. The regulator, the FRC, has been, in response to those things, has been encouraging auditors across the private and public sector to do more and more work to improve the depth and rigour of their testing. And that again has been a source of tension when it's come to the decrease in fees that we've had in place. So we've been responding, we've been increasing the amount of work that we do, but again, that firstly causes pressure around fees and the need for fee variations, but it also means that we can't deliver audit work to the early timescales that were envisaged by government in the accounts and audit regulations. So all of this was creating a bit of a vicious circle. And if we jump onto the slide that says 2019 Summer of Discontent, this is when matters really came to a head. 40% of audits weren't signed by the timetable. There was a big pressure around fees. Auditors were saying we really do need to be paid for the increased work that we have to do, because the regulator is saying that we have to do more and more work in response to this national quality agenda, and we have to follow what the regulator says. They in effect hold our power over our license to audit, so we have to comply with the recommendations that they give us around doing more work, particularly in certain areas. And that all created tension. In addition, the accounts were under more and more strain, and as councils got involved in more and more complex technical areas, there was also, and this isn't an observation on North Somerset, this is an observation across the sector, there was also concern that the quality of local authorities' reporting and preparedness for the audit was not where it needed to be, given the complexity that it was getting into. So that led to an unsustainable position, and then we had COVID-19 on top of that. On the slide, market-only regime, since the Audit Commission was abolished, there is no state provider of audit in the local authority world now. The work is done entirely by the firms. A number of firms have left the market, including a couple of the biggest of the big four firms. And local audit then is really under strain. It's not felt to be within firms an attractive area of work. So part of the challenge, and this is recognised in an independent report that PSAA commissioned on the sustainability of the audit market, which you can see on the PSAA website, should anyone need a look, raised some big questions and big concerns that the market was vulnerable to one or more of the existing firms leaving, given that it was extremely difficult to attract new firms to join the market, and at a more sort of detailed level within the firms, they were struggling to attract the right people to do local audit work, the people that would stick with it and be the auditors of the future. So those are the big questions, and then Redmond came to the rescue, which is the next slide. And that was the brief the Secretary of State gave Redmond at the time to cover not just the audit side of things, but also to cover the actual framework of audit. So the reporting and governance requirements, audit quality and scope, yes, but also to actually look at who are the users of an audit and ask the question, are the users of the audits getting what they require from it? And now we go on to the actual findings of Redmond and MHCLG's response. So Redmond has produced, I think, a really, really good piece of work. And we contributed to that work. I met with his team on a number of occasions, and I continue to represent our firm in this area, and I've been as recently as this Monday speaking to MHCLG on its response and its further actions in response to Redmond. So I like the fact Redmond picked out there was actions for everyone. He recognised that that just trying to fix the audit side of things wouldn't produce a sustainable solution. So he challenged councils to embrace audit more. So there are requirements in Redmond for the auditor to hold an annual meeting with full council, and also formal meetings with the council's statutory officers across the course of the audit. He raised recommendations for audit committees, which echoes the comment earlier about the situation in Wales. So within Redmond, there is the recommendation to bring greater use of independent members into audit committees, potentially chair committees through independent members, if that's appropriate. Make sure that audit committee members are sufficiently trained as well. He also makes observations and comments on regulators and stakeholders, and particularly the point around the role of the regulator in ensuring how audit quality is developed is meaningful for the user of accounts. So at the moment, the FRC will challenge auditors, particularly on their work around property valuations and pensions valuations. Redmond reflects the views of the sector in saying that in these areas, the sector is actually not looking for so much audit work in those areas, but is looking for more audit work around things like complex governance structures, companies that the councils might use to deliver their objectives, how councils might get involved into complex and potentially risky commercial ventures, and the fundamental financial sustainability of councils as many of them approach a situation where they can't balance their books and are looking to things like capitalisation directives and Section 114 reports, that sort of thing. Redmond also makes recommendations to SIPVA that it should take away the currently, as Redmond describes it, unfathomable local authority financial reports. The 200 pages of a very dense technical detail that is very difficult for users, whether it's users within a council or public, to understand and work their way through. ideally to simplify those accounts, but if they can't be simplified, to put in place a summary financial statement that will be much more accessible to external stakeholders, the public, etc. From the audit side, we recognise and welcome the fact that he's made recommendations to timetable. So 31st of July is recognised as just completely inappropriate. That will never work. 30th of September should work, and we can sign up to that. Whether we'll achieve 30th of September across the whole of local government next year, when we're all catching up from a year of COVID and further lockdown working arrangements, I would put a question mark over. But certainly in time, I think auditors should sign up to 30th of September as a date. He talks about the work content and status of the local auditor, to go back to those days when the Audit Commission had potentially greater status and influence, and auditors had that influence as well, given, as I say before, the concerns that local audit had become largely commoditized in recent years. So we welcome that. And he also talks about audit being underpriced. And he brings out in his report comparisons with the way audit fees have gone, not just in the corporate sector, but how audit fees have increased in the central government sector and across other localities like Wales and Scotland, where fees are much higher. And he feels that, yes, audit fees are too low. Refreshingly, and in response, MHCLG has already committed a further 15 million to be circulated through local authorities to pay for the increased scope and the increased work of auditors. Now, 15 million doesn't sound a great deal when it's across all local authorities in England, but it is about 60% of audit fees. So it's a sizable statement from MHCLG. A question from Councillor Westwood again.
Yeah, just a comment really. The coalition government that came in 2010 made a great play of getting rid of red tape, didn't they? Of doing stuff, getting rid of bureaucracy as they saw it. And you can see that in the kind of government by fiat that we have with as far as the date of the accounts to be signed off is concerned. They basically just said, "Oh, well, we'll just bring it forward, shall we? They don't need that long to do it." Well, yes, they do, to do it properly. And secondly, you've got that that feeling that now maybe things have gone too far, that you do need some kind of grip on stuff, some kind of proper grip, rather than just letting people crack on as they think fit. Anyway, there you go. That's political rant over.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just on to my last slide now, which is the areas where I thought Redmond might have gone a little further. And there's, we really do need to recognise the issues which I think have been recognised, but do it properly. I think there's a lot of pressure on government for legislative time. There's a lot of pressure on government for reforming the corporate audit arrangements. Obviously, post-Brexit, there's a lot going on, and there's an extremely now large agenda around COVID and the post-COVID world. So we will be competing for government time and attention. But it's up to us, really, isn't it? It's up to us as auditors. It's up to you as councils. It's up to other stakeholders to really continue to not let this get sort of lost in the long grass. Actions are being taken, as I said. The agreement that the timetable should go to 30th of September, and the extra money coming through are two immediate actions that show that MHCLG do want to recognise the urgency and the importance of improving here. We need to make sure that that's not it, that it goes beyond that. I would like the NHS involved more in the implementing the response, because local audit under legislation is the audits of local authorities and local NHS bodies. To do it just to local authority audit market and regime feels like you're only addressing one half of the issue when really you should include the NHS as well. There's a bit of detail on that slide. I won't go into any more detail other than to say the one point that Redmond did recommend, which was his sort of big sort of innovative big statement recommendation, was to create a new body that he called the Office for Local Audit and Regulation, OLA. Now, that was initially rejected as a proposal by Secretary of State and MHCLG because of the desire not to rebuild the Audit Commission. I think the Audit Commission did a lot of really, really good things, but it also, towards the end of its life, did a lot of things that perhaps alienated itself from government and other stakeholders as a central body. So there is a desire from MHCLG not to go down that road, but there is also the recognition that systems leadership needs to be clear and focused. So, as I said earlier on, if it's not OLA, it can't be any of the 6 or 7 other bodies, because you can't have 6 or 7 leaders. You have no leader if you have that. So by default, it becomes the MHCLG. So I think there is now that greater appreciation there. We are actively talking to MHCLG about now, if it's not OLA, what might it be? What options might they consider further? And that's it. Happy to take any further questions.
Chairman, are there any other questions? There are no more questions?
Can't see anything else, Chairman, in chat.
Thank you, Hazel.
Chairman, just a brief comment, which is how to reinvent the wheel. There you go.
So, thank you, Rich.
Can I just say, I think there's a misprint on page 6 of that report, because John kept on saying MHCLG and that jigsaw is MHCCG.
Thank you. Yes, it is a misprint. I've noticed it before, and yes, we've just been tardy in correcting it.
Yeah.
Typo. So, thank you very much for that, John. Appreciate it greatly, and also look forward to being able to talk with you as we go forward on this, particularly more about the Redmond review. I've attended an LGA thing with Redmond talking on the subject, and he was fascinating and clear, and I thought that was really useful. So, yeah, good work. And I think the work you've done there is good for us. Any more comments from anybody?
Nothing further, Chairman.
That's fine. Thank you very much indeed, John and Gail. Appreciate it. Thank you. Do stick around if you want, or go if you want.
Thank you, Chair. I'll stay and listen particularly as it's my first committee. Interested to stick around.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, John.
That.
Thank you all.
So the next item is risk management, and introduce Richard Pensker to John. John, you know each other, don't you? I think from past. I think you mentioned.
We certainly do. Yes, several years ago. Yes.
Yeah, we do.
You don't look any older, Richard.
If only that was true. Thanks, Chair. Do you want me to lead on this item?
Please do, yes, and share the screen and whatever you'd like to do.
Yeah, I think I don't need to share the screen, Chair. I think the papers are. You've got the papers. It's an information item, so it brings together the Q3 risk registers, the corporate risk register, and the COVID and the Brexit, or with European transitions register, as we now call it. So it's not a usual year as far as risk management is concerned. Normally we'd operate with a corporate risk register and reporting that periodically to the Audit Committee, but the two significant risks of different magnitude, I would say, in how they've materialised around COVID and EU transition, meant that we've kept those separate emergency risk registers also. and they're all reported in detail, and happy to take any questions on those. I would say they operate slightly differently. So as you'd expect, those risks that are written in those registers are dealt with in real time. CLT meets every week, and it will be a very rare CLT meeting where we didn't touch on one of those risks in our business. And routinely, every fortnight, we have an emergency CLT session where we will be reviewing the COVID, particularly the COVID risk register, and also looking into the EU transitions register. So so they're used in real time. There is a little bit of I'll call it duplication, but effectively there's nothing wrong with that. You know, some risks are corporate risks, but they'll also feature in the other risk registers because they're exacerbated by events. So the COVID risk register will clearly mention financial pressures, as will the corporate risk register. So there is a bit of duplication, but I hope I've explained why that's the case. But it's here for information. Apologies also that it's in detail. Sometimes you like to go through the details, so that's provided there for transparency. I have listed the main risks, and they are in different formats. So the format that we will retain and maintain for all registers going forward is the one that's for the corporate risk register. We haven't got round to just adapting all of them to that format. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
So thank you, Richard. I mean, that was one of my observations around that they are different formats and they do have different ways of presenting the information. I also noticed it's different when we come to, I think it's in the Treasury Management Risk Register, that's also a different format. And I welcome having other conversations with you after this meeting about those things. What I would like to observe and appreciate, actually, is that since I've been a councillor and since I've been audit chair, the quality of presentation and visibility and clarity of what's being presented to us as the risk registers, which I think are an important part of governance, has stepped up hugely, I would say. So yeah, I just fully appreciate all the work you've been doing to move much more strongly in that direction. Thank you, Rich, appreciate it. And Mel and everybody else who's been doing it. So are there any specific questions from members?
Councillor Westwood, Chairman.
So, Rich, thank you.
Yeah, just to say, as far as the EU transitions risk register is concerned, our Prime Minister, whose deal this is, doesn't do detail. We do, don't we? We've got it in front of us there. Excellent. Really, it gives us a picture of quite what situation our leaving the EU has put local councils in. Basically, there you go. And I can only commend the way in which you've stepped up and produced this, so that it gives us a good idea, really, of what the situation is. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Any more questions on the risk register?
Don't think so, Chairman, no.
So, John, can I just come back on your comment around format? So I'm also aware that there's a sort of outstanding internal audit report on risk management and risk management references within decision making and committee reports, which we are working through. I think your push for standardisation is important, and we'll try to do that. I think I hope you'll appreciate that we are to some degree still in sort of emergency structures over COVID, which is why they are reported in different formats, because we haven't got round to standardising that. But I would have the same ambition as you, that we would try to move to that through this year.
Thank you, Rich. Yeah, and I fully understand the pressures that everybody who's working in the offices or all offices. I fully understand how much extra the pressure is under this time. So, and I know what you've got to do, certainly. So, thank you, Rich. Appreciate that. I don't have any other questions on that. I do recognise that COVID is creating extraordinary pressures on everything and everybody. I mean, only this morning I was walking my dog, and somebody there was in business and struggling to try and make it work. And I know that, for example, all the grants that you're managing is helping our residents in that way. And that in itself is a huge pressure as well. So I do appreciate it. Thank you. Looks like we have a further question from Marcia.
Councillor Pepperell, yes.
Thank you. Slightly going off beam perhaps on what we're meant to be talking about, I'm not sure. You mentioned about grants, and a slight aside, I was interested to know how much has come in from the government to North Somerset to go intended for grants, and as against how much we paid out.
So, Councillor, I'd have to provide you with a briefing on that. So we do monitor that. So I'll have an email. I receive an email each week around the amounts we receive for various grants. Why that's complicated is the grants are complicated, and there's some are discretionary, some are mandatory. But let me send a briefing round today through to committee members so you can have an answer to that question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rich. I think that covers everything we need to talk about on that report. Is that true?
Yes, Chair, it was information.
Yeah, thank you very much. I do appreciate you bringing it along. Thank you. So, yeah, the recommendation was that we consider and note the audit risk management arrangements and those exercised over the COVID-19 pandemic. So, I think we can take that as noted. The next piece is a senior management review, item 8.
Thanks, Chair. So this is just a verbal update on where we are with the senior management review. So Joe Walker, Chief Exec, concluded the senior management review some months ago, I guess a couple of months ago now. So the main outcomes for that is from a corporate services perspective. We will have a new director of corporate services, which obviously is important to this audit committee in understanding that, but that person will also be the Section 151 officer. That post is currently out for recruitment. I think we're due to shortlist next week and interview the week following. So that's very live. Within corporate services, there was a deletion of a number of posts at AD level, notably head of performance and head of transformation. So those posts are now deleted from our structure, and we have a number of new posts. We have head of people, which is Sue Turner, head of business insight, policy and partnerships, which is Emma Diaku, and head of finance, which is Melanie Watts. So I think there will be further changes. We will have a new director coming, but they are certainly not in the planning. I'm just giving some sort of direction of travel that I suspect that there may be further changes within corporate services, but they are the changes as a result of the senior management review. There is some movement of services away from corporate services. Again, I won't go through all of them, but the most notable ones are major projects, which is led by Jonathan Kirby, moves into the Place Directorate, and he will now report directly to Lucy Shamali. Learning and development, we're still trying to work through where that should go, so that's still in consultation. And emergency management function has gone into public health and regulatory services. So and there are some other changes as well. The other major change from the review was splitting the Adults and Children's Directorate into 2 separate directorates, one for adults and one for children. And Director of Children will be Sheila Smith. Director of Adults is also out for recruitment and is approximately about a week behind the Director of Corporate Services. So again, possibly by the end of February, that should be filled. An interim role, we have Hayley Verico working as the Director of Adults. And the last point really just to say on that is the head of housing post was also deleted, and the housing function and where that sits is also being determined by the corporate leadership team at the moment. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Hearn, Chairman.
Thank you. Sandra?
Richard, I'm on the employment committee, so I do know that the meetings for discussing who might take the role is coming up. When is it possible to have a sort of a little chart as to who's doing what when you send out sort of the budget thing today, whether it's something, because I get so totally confused who does what.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me do that in when I do the other thing. I'll send out because certainly sent through the corporate services one.
Yeah, Chair, if I can just reinforce that.
Yeah,
we've heard various things from various sources. Obviously, you know, the CLT has got to draw everything together, but it would be nice to very good indeed to have a chart so that we can begin to see who's pulling which strings, as it were, these days. All right, thanks very much.
thank you, Rich. And you're both Rich, really, aren't you? But, Richard, Rich, can you also perhaps can we arrange a further briefing on this, say in 4 weeks' time or something like that?
Yeah.
Would
So
that be about the right sort of time scale to have a conversation around it?
Yeah, we could be 4 or 6 weeks. I mean, the reason I've hesitated, Chair, was there will be further changes. So I think having a regular briefing, we've got new directors, and we're having new directors in post. So I know that, you know, having a substantial transfer into place directorate means that Lucy will want to do some further work and restructuring there. That will be some months away. When we have a new director of adults, I suspect there'll be further changes there. And possibly in children's as well. So, but I'm more than happy to do a briefing with you in 4 weeks' time on where we are with things. But I think I guess what I'm encouraging you to do is take a regular briefing, because I think as months progress, there will be other changes which
there will be other changes. Okay, that would be great, Rich. So if we can take a briefing from you in say 4 weeks' time, set up a meeting and do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I think that concludes that item. Any other questions? I don't think there are. I can't see any.
No, Chairman, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Hazel. Appreciate that. The next item is the Treasury Management Strategy. So thank you. I think it's going to be Mel or Steve, is it?
I'm just going to introduce the item. Steve's going to deliver the paper. If members recall, we had a detailed Treasury workshop on this issue in advance of us preparing the Treasury Management Strategy for consideration by the Executive. Steve's done a very good paper to summarise the outcome of that workshop and just so that we can realign and understand everybody's agreements on the conclusions. So I'll hand over to Steve.
Lovely. Thank you, Mel. So I don't think I'm proposing to share the screen unless you'd like me to. Essentially, I'm just going to highlight the content of the report rather than go through the detail of it. So the purpose of the report was to summarise the discussions and outcomes of the Treasury Management Risk Workshop, which we held on the 13th of January. It reflects the discussions held between members, officers and the Council's Treasury Management Advisors, Arling Close, and highlights the issues and concerns that were raised as part of the Audit Committee's role in providing scrutiny over the Council's Treasury Management arrangements. Essentially, the discussions concluded that there were no significant changes proposed to the existing Treasury Management Strategy, and the discussions we held have subsequently been used by officers to inform the drafting of the Treasury Management Strategy for 21-22, which has now been submitted to the Executive for approval, and then subsequent approval by the full Council. I'd just like to highlight and apologise for some typos in paragraph 1.1 regarding the dates of the workshop and the date of the Treasury Management Strategy. I'm afraid that needs to be updated. So as I was saying, the report summarises the discussions that were held. I'm not proposing to reopen those discussions here, given that we've already talked them through, but obviously members may wish to consider whether the report reflects the discussions and conclusions that were reached at the workshop. So in conclusion, subject to the correction of the typos in paragraph 1.1, the Audit Committee is requested to note the key messages from the member training workshop held on the 13th of January, that members recognise that the Council's Treasury Management team would continue to work within the Council's current Treasury Management strategy, given that it provides sufficient flexibility to allow investment opportunities to be considered whilst providing sufficient mitigation of risk, and also that information supporting the Treasury investment strategy will be subject to ongoing review by officers and members supported by the Council's Treasury Management advisors. I'm happy to take any questions, or if anybody has any questions, Chair.
So, anybody got any questions?
Nothing showing, Chairman.
So I'm aware that we had a very long meeting, and I did appreciate that very much. Thank you, Mel and Steve and the member from Arlene Close. I will want to understand how frequently we might be able to re-engage on this subject. I suppose the particular kind of things that I'm interested in is how frequently does PIB meet, how often does it report back, how often does it look at making changes. It has to refer through to COCO, I think you said. I'm interested in basically the processes, around those, which I find that I don't think I'm as clear as I thought I was. So I would appreciate further conversation, not necessarily at this meeting, but at some point in the next few weeks to get some clarity around that, if that's okay, please, Steve.
So, sorry, there's a bit of a lag on my unmuting. Yes, absolutely, happy to take that forward.
Thank you very much, appreciate that. Any other comments, questions? So in that case, we're requested to note the key messages from the Treasury Management Workshop. We're requested that we also note that we've recognised the Council's Treasury Management team would continue to work within the current Treasury Management strategy and accept it provides sufficient flexibility to allow investment opportunities to be considered whilst providing sufficient mitigation of risk. And also I'm invited to note that the information supporting the investment strategy will be subject to an ongoing review by officers and members supported by the Council's Treasury Management advisors. So that's the proposal. Is there anybody against that?
Nothing showing, Chairman.
Abstentions?
No, Chairman.
In that case, we're all agreed that we will note that as a committee. Thank you. So that now brings us to internal audit.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take this this particular paper. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this report updates the Audit Committee on the methodology used to create the internal audit plan for next year, 21-22, and we're asking members for their views on items that they'd like to be considered within the plan. In addition to that, Chair, we would also like to ask the committee to note our intention to keep the plan under constant review, including a 6-month reassessment, and that's in order to prioritise any resources as they may be required. So if you'd like to move on to section 3 of the report, this details to the committee how we use our reasonable assurance model to assist in our audit planning, and members will be familiar with that model from the previous detailed discussions that we've had with them, and it's a method that we use every year to help produce a plan.
Indeed, can we ask Hazel to show that page just so we're all clear about what we're talking about?
Yes, Chairman, just give me 2 seconds.
Thank you very much. Also for the benefit of people maybe watching this later on YouTube and so on.
Yeah, so Hazel's got it there, and that's just section 3, which describes the background to the reasonable assurance model and how it operates. As well as that, Chair, I'd just like to add that we also go through a lengthy stakeholder consultation process, and that's from January through to April. That includes various meetings, discussions and conversations with people at the Section 151 officer, Mel as the head of finance, each of the Directorate of Finance business partners, each of the Directorate leadership teams, the Statutory Officers Group, the Corporate Leadership Team, Financial Strategy Board, and of course also as the Audit Committee. So again, I just want to highlight that it does go through a very rigorous and detailed consultation process in order to get to the final plan. Moving on to section 3.4 of the report, this describes the impact of COVID-19 on our planning process. And in this current financial year, members will of course be aware that ongoing changes to plan work were required in order to redirect our audit resources to unforeseen issues arising from the pandemic. One of those being the grants that you mentioned earlier that, and discussed with Richard Pensker. So you'll also recall that in November 2020, the current audit plan was rebased for the rest of this financial year. And we did this once we had a better understanding of the impact of COVID-19 and how our resources should then be subsequently prioritised. It follows, therefore, that it's our intention to follow a similar approach for the 21-22 internal audit plan. So whilst, as I've just described, the usual consultation process will follow, a full year audit plan will be produced to cover the period April 21 through to 31st of March 2022. However, the plan will be kept under constant review as it was this year and adjusted to cover any further unforeseen requirements over the first 6 months. I then suggest that we would then review the plan again at the 6-month stage in order to adequately prioritise and resource the second half of the financial year. In addition to that, we're also going to apply a COVID-19 contingency resource, and that will then help smooth any further impact upon the plan. So in terms of the Audit Committee's input, obviously we welcome today the views and feedback of the committee on areas of which the planning process can then consider, and then we can take account of any comments that you may have today before it is finalised before the end of March. As well as the process, as well as the COVID-19 activity which I've mentioned, I've also included under section 3.5 there the Chartered Institute of Internal Auditors. They've drawn up 10 key areas for 2021, which organisations should take account of in preparing their audit plans. They're documented on pages 2 and 3 of my reports, and these help the committee in understanding where they feel audit coverage may be beneficial. These just give some examples of where the CIIA think that some focus may be required. So really, Chair, that concludes the report. I'm happy to take any comments from members today, and of course we will be having our ongoing consultation for our informal catch-up meetings. So I'll also take any further comments as we go through that process.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate that. Any questions? Any comments?
Nothing indicated, Chairman.
Thank you. Personally, I would just like to appreciate the work you're doing, Pete, and everybody on the team. It's an important part of ensuring governance and giving every member assurance. And I think, yeah, it's something that we definitely value in the same way that we value our external auditors, and the same issues that came out of Redmond, I think, apply through to internal audit as well. Personally, I would appreciate more opportunity to speak in more detail about some of these things. I think this particular meeting doesn't allow enough time probably to have an in-depth conversation about all the possible areas that you've got going on here. I recognise that you're also consulting with many other people and officers, and that you have to maintain independence to do your job well. So yeah, I'd just like to say that I'd like to organise another meeting sometime with you and internal audit to have a conversation with the audit committee about these issues you've got on your list and other issues that may be worth talking about. Would that be okay?
Very, very happy to accommodate that, Chairman, and thank you for your comments as well.
Thank you, appreciate that.
And likewise from us, Chair, any further engagement, more than happy to do so.
No, I appreciate that, John. I definitely do. It's important that we do everything we can to do the best we can, because we all benefit from this work, even though you know, it's one of those not necessarily most sought after professions, as you mentioned, but it is actually incredibly important, and I value it. So let's go back to the recommendations on this report, if there are no further questions.
Nothing, Chairman, no.
Thank you. So the recommendations are that the Audit Committee is asked to comment on any areas or themes they would like to be considered in relation to the plan, and I'm proposing that we further do that later on in the next month or two. And note the intention to keep the plan under constant review, including a 6-month reassessment in order to prioritise resources as required. Are there any people that aren't happy to note that?
None, Chairman.
Abstentions?
No, Chairman.
All agreed then, thank you. Next part of this is, when I find my notes, which you kindly prepared for me, Hazel. To ask if there's any other urgent business. I don't think there is. Is that right, Hazel?
I haven't been made aware of any, Chairman, no.
Okay, that's fine. So there being no further business, I declare the formal meeting completed now, and I want to say thank you to everybody who's attended and given time and effort to make this happen in so many different ways. Totally appreciate you all, you know, because as I said earlier, it's really important work. The Audit Committee, if I may set up another quick Teams meeting in 5 minutes to have a quick chat with you all, I'd appreciate that. And I will initiate a Teams meeting for us all after this one, if that'd be fine. Would that be okay?